It was a quiet Sunday morning in the city, the kind of morning where time seems to slow down. The CEO, Alexander Reed, one of the most powerful men in the corporate world, decided to do something rare, take his daughter to the park himself. No chauffeurs, no assistants, just a father trying to remember what it felt like to live simply. As his little girl ran toward the swings, Alexander's phone buzzed, yet another bored alert. But then he heard her laughter, pure, unfiltered, and real. It was the kind of sound money couldn't buy. He looked up and froze. His daughter wasn't alone. She was speaking to a woman sitting on a nearby bench. Her clothes were old, her hands rough, her hair tucked beneath a worn-out scarf. She looked tired yet gentle. The woman smiled as the little girl handed her a flower she had picked. For a second, Alexander's instincts kicked in: protectiveness, caution. He walked briskly over. "Sweetheart, come here," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. The woman's eyes met his, and he felt something strange stir in his chest. Recognition. She looked at him softly and said, "Mr. Reed, I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to thank your daughter. She reminded me of someone I once cared for deeply." Alexander frowned. "Do I know you?" The woman smiled faintly, her voice trembling. "I used to be your wife's nurse back when she was in the hospital." The world seemed to pause. The noise of the park faded. The laughter of children turned distant. For a moment, Alexander couldn't breathe. His wife, Claire, the love of his life, gone too soon after a long battle with illness. And now, standing before him, was a piece of that painful past he had buried beneath layers of business meetings and boardroom victories. He whispered almost to himself, You took care of her." The woman nodded, her eyes misting, until her very last day. Alexander couldn't move. He stared at the woman, her name still hiding somewhere in the fog of his memory. He remembered hospital corridors filled with the scent of antiseptic, his wife's fading smile, and a nurse who always stayed late, whispering comfort when words no longer helped. Finally, he said softly, "Your name, what was it?" "Marion," she replied. "Marion Ellis." That name struck him like a memory long locked away. Claire used to talk about her, the nurse with the warm hands. She'd say, "She makes the pain easier to bear." Alexander's daughter tugged at his hand. "Daddy, she's nice. She gave me a storybook." He looked down and saw the tattered children's book in her hands, its pages worn, its corners frayed. Marion smiled gently. That was the book Claire loved reading. She said one day she wanted to read it to your little girl. A lump formed in Alexander's throat. The sun glared behind her, almost like the universe itself wanted him to see not a poor woman, but an angel from a time of love, loss, and grace. But then his corporate instincts took over again, the voice that ruled boardrooms, not hearts. "Why are you here, Marion? What happened to you?" She hesitated, lowering her eyes. "Life changed after the hospital closed. I tried to find work, but after my husband's accident, things got difficult." He looked at her worn shoes, the trembling hands, the quiet dignity she still carried despite everything. Shame crept through him. He had more money than he could ever spend, and yet the woman who once cared for his dying wife now sat on a park bench with nothing. Before he could speak, his daughter hugged Marion suddenly and said, "You smell like Mommy's room." Tears filled Marion's eyes. "That's because I was there with her, sweetheart." Alexander felt something inside him break, a dam of emotions he had kept sealed for years. He took a deep breath, his voice shaking. "Marion, would you come with me, please?" The ride back to Alexander's mansion was silent. The city moved around them, car horns, flashing lights, the endless pulse of life, yet inside that car, time stood still. Marion sat quietly beside his daughter, her worn hands folded neatly on her lap. She looked out the window, almost as if afraid to exist in this new world of luxury. Alexander stole glances at her through the rear-view mirror. Something about her calmness, her humility, it made him feel small. The man who built empires couldn't shake the feeling that he had overlooked something priceless. When they arrived, his daughter ran inside, her laughter echoing down the marble hallway. Marian stood at the doorway, hesitant. "You can come in," Alexander said softly. "You're a guest here." She stepped inside slowly, her eyes scanning the walls, photographs of Claire smiling, holding their baby, and one with the entire hospital staff. Her breath caught when she saw it. There she was, younger, happier, standing beside Claire. She touched the photo gently. She was radiant that day. She said she felt strong even though she was hurting. Alexander's throat tightened. "You were there till the end," Marian nodded. "She was the kindest soul I'd ever met. She spoke about you every day, about how much she wanted you to move on and live fully for her and for your daughter." He looked away, pain flickering in his eyes. "I tried. I thought burying myself in work would help." She gave him a sad smile. "She knew you would." Then Marian reached into her bag, old, faded, nearly falling apart, and pulled out an envelope yellowed with age. "I was supposed to give you this, but you never came back to the hospital after she passed." Alexander's hands trembled as he took it. The handwriting, delicate and familiar, Claire's. He unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the words as his voice cracked with emotion. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I want you to know you were my greatest love, but my greatest worry too. Don't lose your heart to the noise of success. One day, someone will remind you of what really matters. When that happens, don't turn away. Help them, and you'll help me live on." The room went silent. The only sound was the quiet hum of the clock on the wall. Tears welled in Alexander's eyes. He looked up at Marian, his voice breaking. "She wanted me to find you." Marian smiled through her tears. "Maybe not find me, Mr. Reed, but find the kindness you both believed in." Alexander closed his eyes and whispered, "Then let's start now." He looked at her with sincerity, not as a CEO, not as a man of wealth, but as a husband, a father, and a soul rediscovering compassion. The sun had long set behind the city skyline. The mansion was quiet, the air heavy with memories. Alexander sat alone in his study, Claire's letter still trembling in his hands. Every word felt like a whisper from beyond time, a reminder of the woman who had believed in him when he no longer believed in himself. He could still hear her voice, soft, full of warmth. "When you forget how to feel, Alex, just look for the good in people. It'll lead you home." And somehow, that good had found him today, sitting quietly in his living room, drinking tea from a cup that looked too delicate for her calloused hands. Marian, the woman who had once stood beside his wife through her final breaths, and who now sat in his house, humbled by circumstance, but strong in spirit. He took a deep breath and walked in. She rose immediately. "Mr. Reed, I should go. You've been kind enough already." He shook his head gently. "Please stay. You have nowhere else to be tonight, do you?" She hesitated, then sat back down, her eyes fixed on the steaming cup in front of her. "I don't like being a burden," she murmured. Alexander's voice softened. "You're not. You cared for my wife when I couldn't. You gave her peace in her last moments. That's something I can never repay." She smiled faintly. It wasn't about repayment. She was special. Even when she was sick, she'd ask about my son. She used to say she'd help him one day when she got better. Alexander's brow furrowed. "Your son?" Marian nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes, Jacob. He was 15 back then, bright, gentle, but life was unkind. After my husband's accident, I couldn't afford his school anymore. He started working part-time at a mechanic shop. Then, when Claire passed, I lost my job. The hospital downsized and I couldn't keep up. We lost the apartment." Her voice cracked. "I kept hoping something would change. But life doesn't wait for hope, does it?" For a moment, silence filled the space, the kind of silence that hurts. Alexander's mind raced. How could someone who once gave so much now have so little? He leaned forward. "Marion, did Claire ever mention giving you something? Anything unusual before she passed?" Marion looked confused, then shook her head. "No, only her gratitude. She said I reminded her of her younger self, strong but scared." Alexander stood and walked to his desk. He opened a drawer that had remained untouched for years, a small chest of memories. Inside were photos, her wedding ring, and a sealed envelope labeled for Alex, "When the time feels right." His heart pounded. He had never opened it. He tore it open now. Inside was a folded letter and beneath it a legal document. He began to read. "My love, if you ever meet Marion again, please do for her what I couldn't finish. I set aside a trust small, but enough to help her son go to school. He's meant for something more. If life ever brings her back into your world, it means fate is asking you to finish what I started." Alexander's breath caught. He turned the paper around, and there it was. A signed trust fund certificate, unclaimed, untouched, left forgotten in his drawer for all these years. His eyes filled with tears. He looked at Marion, who watched him silently, confused. He placed the papers before her. "Claire did remember your son. She tried to help you. She never got the chance." Marion's hands shook as she read the letter. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She really meant it. Alexander nodded. "And now it's time we honor her promise." She tried to speak, but her voice broke. "Mr. Reed, I can't accept." "You can." He interrupted, his tone firm but gentle. "Because this isn't charity. This is what she wanted. This is love continuing its work." The old nurse covered her face and wept. For the first time in years, they weren't CEO and caretaker, just two people connected by loss, healing through kindness. Alexander looked out the window, the night sky glittering like distant memories. He whispered softly, "Claire, you're still guiding me, aren't you?" His daughter ran into the room, holding her mother's photo. "Daddy, Mommy's smiling in this one." He smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart, she always knew how to make people smile." Marion rose, her eyes still glistening. "She'd be proud of you." Alexander shook his head gently. "No, Marion, she'd be proud of us." The three of them stood in silence, a billionaire, a nurse, and a child, all bound by a love that refused to die. And in that moment, Alexander finally understood what his wife meant when she wrote, "When you forget how to feel, find the good in people, it'll lead you home." He was home. 2 months later, the city buzzed with anticipation. The Grand Horizon Foundation, Alexander Reed's company, was hosting its annual charity gala, a night of glamour, power, and wealth. But tonight something felt different. For the first time in years, Alexander wasn't thinking about profits or projections. He wasn't thinking about mergers or deals. He was thinking about her, his late wife Claire, and the promise he had finally fulfilled. Behind the stage, Marion stood quietly in a simple dress his daughter had picked for her. She looked nervous, out of place among the tuxedos and diamonds. But when she saw Alexander's little girl waving from the front row, she smiled, that same kind, gentle smile that once comforted a dying woman. The lights dimmed, the music softened, the crowd hushed. Alexander stepped up to the microphone. He looked out at the sea of powerful faces, people who measured success in numbers, not in hearts. He took a deep breath and began, "Tonight, I want to tell you a story, not about business, but about something far more valuable." His voice was steady, but his eyes shimmered with emotion. Years ago, when my wife was sick, there was a nurse who cared for her. She wasn't rich or famous or powerful, but she had something money could never buy: kindness. The room grew still. Forks paused midair. After my wife passed, I buried myself in work. I told myself success would fill the emptiness she left behind, but I was wrong, because success without compassion is just noise. He looked toward Marion, who sat quietly at a small table near the stage. A few weeks ago, fate brought that nurse back into my life, not as an employee but as a reminder. She was struggling, living in a world that had forgotten her, but she never lost her heart, and because of her, I remembered what my wife taught me, that love doesn't end when someone leaves. It continues through the people we choose to care for. His daughter smiled proudly, clutching her mother's photo. So tonight, I'm announcing something new: the Claire Reid Foundation. It will fund scholarships for nurses, caregivers, and families who dedicate their lives to helping others. And the first director of this foundation is the very woman who inspired it. He turned toward Marion. The spotlight followed. Her eyes widened in disbelief as the crowd began to rise, applause swelling through the grand hall. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she stood slowly, trembling, overwhelmed. Alexander extended his hand toward her. "Marion Ellis, thank you for reminding me what it means to be human." The audience stood in silence for a long moment before breaking into thunderous applause. Some wiped away tears. Even the hardest faces softened. Marion walked onto the stage, her hands shaking as she took the microphone. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of truth. "I don't know what to say except thank you, not for the position, but for seeing me, for seeing all the people who care quietly without reward. Your wife once told me that the world changes not by power, but by kindness. Tonight, I believe she was right." Alexander smiled, eyes wet. She was always right. The orchestra began to play softly Claire's favorite song. The room filled with warmth, light, and something almost holy. As the melody carried, Alexander's daughter climbed onto the stage, holding a small flower, the same kind she had once given Marion in the park. She placed it gently in her father's hand. "Mommy would have liked this," she whispered. Alexander nodded, his voice barely a breath. "She's here, sweetheart. She never left." He looked at the crowd once more, a hole of power now humbled by compassion. "If my story means anything tonight," he said softly, "let it be this. Never underestimate a small act of kindness. It might just be the thing that saves someone's life or your own." The lights dimmed, and the audience stood in a quiet standing ovation. Some clapped, some cried, but everyone felt something rare: the truth that wealth means nothing without humanity. As the music swelled, Alexander turned to Marion, his voice barely audible. "We did it, Claire." And for a fleeting second, in the light, the music, and the tears, it felt as though she was there, smiling, proud, and eternal.